7 Azure Cost Optimization Tips for Startups in 2026. Hi there. Today we'll talk about 7 Azure Cost Optimization Tips for Startups in 2026. We'll cover everything you need to know about Azure Cost Optimization for Startups. So, let's get started. Why Azure cloud costs can spiral out of control for startups. Without a dedicated Azure cost optimization approach, most startups end up overpaying by a significant margin. The reason is not carelessness. It is that the default Azure setup is built for convenience, not cost efficiency. Common cost traps include virtual machines left running overnight and over weekends, oversized VM SKUs that never fully use their allocated compute storage accounts, accumulating old logs, backups, and orphan blobs, dev and test environments mirroring production resource sizes, no budget alerts, so overspends only surface on the monthly invoice. According to Flexera's 2024 State of the Cloud report, organizations waste an average of 28% of their cloud spend. For a startup spending $5,000 per month on Azure, that is $1,400 in avoidable costs every single month, or over $16,000 per year. Understanding where the waste lies is the first step. The 7 tips below give you a clear action plan to address it. Tip 1. Move from pay-as-you-go to Azure Reserved Instances. Azure Reserved Instances are a 1-year or 3-year commitment to a specific VM type and region, in exchange for discounts of up to 72% compared to pay-as-you-go pricing. For any workload you can predict, such as web servers, databases, or background processing jobs, reserved instances are one of the fastest ways to achieve Azure cost optimization for startups spending under $10,000 monthly. The commitment is the trade-off, but for stable infrastructure, it is almost always worth it. Here is what the math looks like in practice. A standard _D4S_V3 VM running in East US on pay-as-you-go costs roughly $0.192 per hour, around $140 per month. The same VM on a 3-year reserved instance drops to approximately $0.068 per hour, closer to $50 per month. Across a small cluster of 4 such servers, you are saving around $360 per month without changing a single line of code. The key requirement is that the workload must be stable and consistent. Reserved instances are not a good fit for burst workloads or environments you spin up occasionally. For those, Azure Savings Plans are the better option. For a detailed breakdown of how to structure your reserved instance purchases, our guide to reducing cloud costs by 40% with Azure Reserved Instances walks through the full decision framework. Tip 2. Use Azure Savings Plans for flexible workload coverage. Azure Savings Plans differ from reserved instances in one critical way. Instead of committing to a specific VM SKU and region, you commit to a fixed hourly dollar spend across any eligible compute service. This makes them significantly more flexible for startups whose infrastructure changes frequently. With a savings plan, you might commit to spending $5 per hour across virtual machines, Azure App Services, Azure Functions, and container instances. Microsoft then applies automatic discounts of up to 65% to the portion of your usage covered by that commitment. Here is a quick comparison to help you decide which option fits your situation. Feature reserved instances. Azure Savings Plans commitment type specific VM SKU plus region hourly dollar spend discount depth up to 72% up to 65% flexibility low high best for stable, predictable workloads mixed or evolving infrastructure scope single subscription or shared across subscriptions for most startups running a mix of app services, Azure Functions, and a handful of VMs. Combining a savings plan with reserved instances on your most stable workloads produces the best overall result. This combination is the core of most Azure Savings Plans for SMBs. Recommendations from Microsoft's own cost engineers. Tip 3. Set up Azure budget alerts before you overspend. Cloud cost management on Azure requires visibility above everything else. Without budget alerts configured, the first time you know you have a cost problem is when the invoice arrives. Setting up Azure budget alerts takes about 10 minutes and can prevent expensive surprises. Here is how to do it. Navigate to Cost Management plus Billing in the Azure portal. Select your subscription and click Budgets. Set a monthly budget that reflects your expected spend. Configure alert thresholds at 80%, 100%, and 120% of that budget. Add email recipients, your finance contact, tech lead, or founding team, Optionally connect an Azure Action Group to send teams notifications or trigger automated scale-down responses for startups targeting an Azure cost optimization checklist for under $10,000 per month. Set your first alert at 70% of budget. This gives you roughly 2 weeks to investigate and course correct before hitting your ceiling. Azure Budget Management for startups should also include anomaly detection. Azure Cost Management's anomaly alerts fire automatically when spending spikes unexpectedly, which is especially useful for catching runaway serverless functions or misconfigured autoscaling rules. Microsoft's official cost management and billing documentation provides step-by-step instructions for configuring budgets across all subscription types and management groups. Tip 4. Use Azure Cost Management to find waste fast. Azure Cost Management is a free tool built into every Azure subscription. It gives you a detailed breakdown of spend by resource, resource group, service type, tag, and time period, making it straightforward to spot anomalies in high-cost services before they become a real problem. Key features worth using on a weekly basis. Cost analysis, visual breakdowns of spend by service, region, or custom tag anomaly detection, automatic alerts when daily spending deviates from expected patterns recommendations, Microsoft Surface's specific cost-saving suggestions directly in the interface Power BI integration. Export billing data into Power BI dashboards for richer analysis and stakeholder reporting. Resource tagging is what multiplies the value of Azure Cost Management. When every resource carries a tag like OR, you can filter cost reports to see exactly which team or environment is driving spend. Many startups skip tagging in the early days and regret it once the bill grows and they cannot attribute costs to specific projects. For a structured approach to cloud cost management on Azure, including how to tier your resources for maximum visibility, check out our tier-by-tier Azure Cost Optimization Guide. Tip 5. Right-size virtual machines and eliminate idle resources. Right-sizing is the process of matching your VM SKU to actual workload requirements rather than the capacity you estimated when you first provisioned the server. This is one of the highest impact, lowest risk Azure spending optimization moves available to any startup. It is also the most commonly skipped, usually because it requires someone to review performance metrics and make a judgment call. Steps to right-size your Azure VMs. Open Azure Monitor and review CPU and memory utilization over the past 30 days. Flag any VM averaging below 20% CPU utilization, a strong signal of over-provisioning. Identify VMs running outside business hours that could be put on an auto-shutdown schedule. Use Azure Advisor, covered below. For automated right-sizing recommendations, resize down by one tier on all dev and test VMs. Immediately auto-shutdown deserves special attention. Dev and test VMs running 24/7 cost 4 times as much as VMs that shut down after business hours. Configuring auto-shutdown on all non-production resources can cut that portion of your bill by 60 to 70% with zero impact on developer productivity. The Azure Pricing Calculator makes it easy to compare costs before committing to a resize or shutdown schedule change. Tip 6. Cut operational costs with Power Platform automation. Azure Cost Optimization for startups is not only about infrastructure pricing. A significant portion of your cloud bill can come from operational overhead, specifically manual processes running on Azure Compute that could be automated or replaced at lower cost. Power Platform, Microsoft's low-code suite, can handle many of those processes at a fraction of the cost. Here are practical examples. Power Automate can replace lightweight Azure Function or Logic App workflows for routine tasks like file processing, email notifications, or data syncing. You pay per user licensing rather than per execution compute costs. Power Apps Canvas apps can serve as internal tools that would otherwise require a full app service deployment with a custom front-end. Power BI can replace scheduled reporting applications that query Azure SQL on a recurring interval, reducing both compute and data transfer costs. Power Platform cost efficiency is most visible for startups building internal tooling. Shifting lower complexity workflows to Power Platform frees up your Azure Compute budget for the workloads that genuinely need dedicated infrastructure. We have covered this approach in depth in our guide to 5 Power Platform low-code solutions for SMBs, including a breakdown of when Power Platform beats custom Azure development on total cost of ownership. Tip 7. Act on Azure Advisor cost recommendations. Azure Advisor is Microsoft's built-in recommendation engine. It analyzes your actual usage patterns and flags specific resources where you can reduce spend, functioning like a free cost consultant reviewing your infrastructure continuously in the background. Advisor surfaces recommendations across 4 areas that matter most for cost. Underutilized VMs, specific machines where utilization consistently falls below Microsoft's defined thresholds. Unattached managed disks, storage volumes with no associated VM, pure waste with no operational value. Reserved instance opportunities. Based on your usage history, Advisor identifies which resources would benefit most from commitment pricing. Idle SQL databases. Databases with minimal query activity that could be paused, resized, or migrated to serverless tiers. Each recommendation comes with an estimated monthly savings figure attached, so you can prioritize by impact. Many startups that run through Azure Advisor for the first time find between $200 and $500 per month in quick wins they can act on the same day. According to Microsoft's Azure Advisor documentation, customers who consistently follow Advisor recommendations save around 20% on compute spend on average. For a startup at $8,000 per month, that is $1,600 returned to the budget every month. For startups managing both cost and compliance on Azure, our guide on Azure Cloud Security for SMBs explains how Advisor security and cost recommendations work in parallel. Azure Cost Optimization Checklist for startups under $10,000 per month. If you want a quick way to audit your Azure cost posture, work through this checklist. It covers the core Azure cost optimization practices for startups at any stage of growth. Identify all VMs on pay-as-you-go pricing that run continuously. Purchase reserved instances or an Azure savings plan for stable workloads. Set monthly budget alerts at 70%, 100%, and 120% thresholds. Tag all resources with environment, team, and project labels. Review Azure cost management at least once per week, 30 minutes. Configure auto shutdown on all dev and test VMs outside business hours. Run Azure Advisor and resolve all high-priority cost recommendations. Evaluate Power Platform as a replacement for lightweight compute workloads. Right-size any VM averaging below 20% CPU over a 30-day window. Delete all unattached managed disks and outdated snapshots. Completing this checklist for the first time typically uncovers 20 to 35% in cost reductions for startups that have been running on Azure for 6 or more months without a formal cost review. For a broader view of how Azure pricing stacks up against other major cloud providers, our Azure versus AWS versus Google Cloud comparison breaks down total cost of ownership differences for SMB workloads in detail. Conclusion: Azure cost optimization for startups is not a one-time project. It is an ongoing discipline that compounds over time as your team builds better habits and your infrastructure matures. The 7 tips in this guide cover the areas that deliver the most savings with the least disruption: commitment pricing through reserved instances and savings plans, visibility through cost management and budget alerts, efficiency through right-sizing in Azure Advisor, and smarter tooling choices through Power Platform. Startups that treat their Azure spending as a product metric rather than just an operations expense consistently come out ahead. Start with the checklist above, set up your budget alerts today, and run Azure Advisor this week. Most teams find their first meaningful savings within 48 hours of starting a focused cost review. If you want help building a custom Azure cost optimization strategy tailored to your startup's specific workloads and budget, our team is ready to help. Contact us to schedule a free cloud cost review.